Okay, so what is page flow? Page flow is how the reader's eyes move across the manga page, depending on whether you read from left or right. The flow of the page usually starts in the respective top corner. Good flow makes it easy for the reader's eyes to know which scene is next and doesn't overwork the reader. It's easier to show you examples of good and bad page flow, rather than just tell you, but first we need to lay some groundwork. Since page flow is how the reader's eyes move across the page, we first need to talk about how we can direct the reader's attention. There are many techniques, but I will talk about the most common ones. The most obvious technique to draw the reader's attention is the use of speech bubbles. We as readers obviously want to know what the characters are saying and what's happening in the story. As a result, our eyes are naturally drawn to the speech bubbles. I would even argue that most of the time, speech bubbles take priority over all other attention-seeking areas of the page. Another technique is utilizing characters, more specifically, their faces. Humans are kind of self-centered creatures, so when we see another human or something that has anything that resembles a face, we recognize it and thus our attention is focused on it. As a neat trick, you can also use the direction the eyes of the face is looking at to control where the reader looks next. The last common technique requires an understanding of art fundamentals overall, rather than just manga fundamentals specifically. Composition is the most commonly used technique when it comes to big artworks or manga pages. Composition is something that warrants its own video, but for now understand that composition is how the whole artwork focuses or enhances a smaller area of said artwork. Mangakas typically use speed lines, negative space, or size to emphasize an area they want. But like I said, composition warrants its own video, so just keep this in the back of your head for now. Okay. Now that we've explored common techniques authors use to guide the reader through the page, let's look at an actual page to see how these techniques are used in practice. I will draw a line through the page to indicate the path of the reader's eyes. Here's some pages from our early chapters of Guren. We're reading from left to right, so we begin at the top left corner of the page. This page has bad flow mainly because there's too much happening on one page. There are 7 points where the flow has to change direction. This is overworking the reader. Also, the page flow in this area almost indicates that this panel is next, but it's actually the panel adjacent to it that's next. It would have been better to turn this one page into 2 pages, so the dialogue can be split up and the flow can be less chaotic. Now, let's look at the manga love bullet. Since we read from the right, we start with our eyes at the top right of the page. Our eyes are drawn towards the speech bubble first, and move left across the page, our attention moving from characters to speech bubbles. When we reach the end, we move back to the right side of the page to the speech bubble. Then our eyes again move left through the page very easily, and we have to move to the next panel and finish our journey from there. You can see how the flow is very simple, pretty much just 3 horizontal lines, so it's easy for the reader to follow. The next page is much simpler. We start with the speech bubble, then the composition points us to the big explosion, which leads us to the next speech bubble, and then we end our journey at the character's face. You can see that the page flow is much simpler than the previous page, this being one giant curve. This page is even easier for the reader's eyes to follow. Generally, for pages where one giant artwork takes up most of the page, you want a very simple flow so that the reader can appreciate the amazing art instead of having to worry about where to look next. Finally, let's take a look at the example we drew in the previous tutorial. We start at the top right corner on Sasuke, and the action guides us towards Naruto, whose eyes are looking to the right, leading us to the panel where he shouts Sasuke's name. And because he's facing left, our eyes move to the panel of Sasuke unsheathing his sword. Notice how the sword is angled upwards towards Sasuke in the next panel, who is attacking Naruto below him. Looking at the page flow, it's very simple, with few turns and multiple instances of the previous panel guiding the reader to the next panel. This is good page flow. I hope you can see the difference between bad and good page flows. A page should guide the viewer easily and without overworking their attention. Bad flow will make your pages hard to read and make the reader uncomfortable. If you want to fix your page flow, you can change the perspective of the scene, the paneling, the page amounts, or whatever else you can think of. Get creative with it. Remember, good page flow goes unnoticed. When you do the right things, people won't be sure you've done anything at all.